Did you know there's a lake so vast you can't see the other side? Because the far shore hides below the curve of the earth. Its water can kill a strong swimmer in minutes, in July, just feet from the beach. And for generations, sailors have called it the lake that never gives up her dead. This is Lake Superior, and most of what you think you know about it is wrong, because it isn't really a lake at all. It's an inland sea, colder, deeper, and far more dangerous than Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario, the four Great Lakes around it, and it holds more water than all of them combined. Today, we're going to explore 35 secrets even the locals don't know. 35. The fresh water that could drown 2 continents. If you lifted all of Superior's water out and poured it evenly across both North and South America, you could submerge everything from the Canadian Arctic to the tip of Chile under a full foot of water. That's 3 quadrillion gallons, 10% of all the fresh surface water on Earth, held in a single lake. No freshwater lake on the planet covers more ground, and only 2, Baikal and Tanganyika, hold more. People call it the biggest of the Great Lakes, and it is, but that barely captures it. This isn't a regional record, it's a global one. 34. It's not a lake, it's a sea. The people who knew this water first never called it a lake. To the Ojibwe, it was Gichigami, the Great Sea, and in their language, that name is reserved for water on the scale of an ocean. Even the name in the famous song, Gichigumi, is just an English spelling of that same word. The French who arrived in 1641 called it Lac Supérieur, the upper lake, not for any grandeur, but because it sat above Lake Huron on the map. The people who lived here for thousands of years had it right the first time. This was never a lake. It was a sea, filed under the wrong word. 33. The cold that ignores the calendar. Most lakes warm up in summer. Superior barely bothers. Go down past 600 feet and the water sits at 39 degrees. All year, every year. To feel how strange that is, look one lake over. Lake Erie warms into the high 70s by August, while Superior stays locked near 40. The reason is sheer volume. 3 quadrillion gallons. So much water that a whole season of sun can't meaningfully heat it. So when people picture a refreshing summer swim, they're picturing a thin, warm skin on top. A few feet down, the lake is still locked in winter. And that cold, as we'll see, is lethal. 32. The building that would vanish. Stand the Empire State Building on the floor of Lake Superior, and it would disappear completely. The deepest point reaches 1,332 feet, while the tower itself, roof to ground, stands 1,250, so even its rooftop would sit more than 80 feet underwater. That deepest spot, north of Munising, Michigan, lies 700 feet below sea level, one of the lowest places on the continent, and no human reached it until 1985. People imagine a lake floor you could almost wade across. Here, a skyscraper would sink without a trace. 31. The guardian beneath the island. Off the northeastern shore sits Mishipakaten Island, and in Ojibwe tradition, something lives beneath it. They call it Mishipeshu, the great water lynx, a horned cat with scales down its back, said to guard the lake's copper and drown those who take it without respect. You can still see it painted in red ochre on a cliff at Agawa Rock. A Jesuit recorded the warning in the 1660s. 4 men took copper from the island, and all 4 died on the way home. The legend did a practical job. It marked the lake as something owed respect, a lesson the shipping records would prove in full. 30. The lake that makes its own weather. Superior is big enough to behave like a weather system in its own right. When cold Arctic air sweeps across the warmer water in winter, it picks up moisture and dumps it back as snow, relentless and staggering in volume. The Keweenaw Peninsula, jutting north into the lake, catches the worst. More than 300 inches in a single season. That's over 25 feet of snow, taller than a 2-story house, on towns like Houghton year after year. People think lake effect snow is a Buffalo thing, but Superior quietly buries the Keweenaw under totals that rival mountain ski resorts, and most of the country has never heard of the place. 29. The graveyard of the Great Lakes. There's a stretch of Superior's eastern shore that sailors learn to fear, and it has a name, the Graveyard of the Great Lakes. It runs from Whitefish Point toward Munising, and well over 200 shipwrecks lie along it, out of roughly 550 in the whole lake. That works out to about 1 wreck every third of a mile, because every ship bound for the shelter of Whitefish Bay has to round that single point, funneling all the traffic into one storm-exposed turn. So the danger isn't bad luck. Its geography. People hear Graveyard of the Great Lakes and picture all 5. It's this one stretch of this one lake. 28. Miners were here 4,500 years ago. Long before any Europeans saw this water, people were mining its shores. On Isle Royal and the Keweenaw, indigenous miners were pulling copper from the ground at least 4,500 years ago, without smelting, because the copper here is pure enough to hammer straight into tools. To place that in time, while the Egyptians were raising the pyramids, Ojibwe ancestors were already working metal on Lake Superior. People assume metalworking in North America arrived with settlers. It was happening here 4 millennia before they showed up. 27. You genuinely can't see across it. Stand on the south shore, look north, and you will not see Canada. You won't see any land at all, just water meeting sky, exactly like an ocean horizon. The lake is 160 miles across at its widest, and the curve of the earth hides the far shore completely. A person at the water's edge can see only about 3 miles out before the planet curves away. Early explorers reaching this shore doubted their own maps. It looked like open ocean. There are spots where you can watch a ship sail out and vanish bottom first, dropping below the curve, not because it sank, but because the earth bent away beneath it. 26. Freshwater drowns you faster. Here's something that sounds wrong, but isn't. You're more likely to drown in freshwater than in the ocean. Salt water is denser, so it holds you up. More of your body rides above the surface at sea. Fresh water gives less lift, so you sit lower and tire faster, fighting just to keep your mouth clear. And freshwater waves come shorter and steeper than ocean swells, choppier and closer together, harder to swim through. People assume a lake is gentler than the sea. In the water, Superior is anything but. If you've got a favorite so far, drop it in the comments. Honestly, the comments on these videos tend to be more interesting than the videos themselves, at least to me. And someone watching this is going to know Superior better than I do. If you're sticking around to the end, the subscribe button is right there too. Back to it. 25. The cliffs painted by minerals. On the southern shore near Munising, the rock itself is in color. For about 15 miles, the sandstone cliffs of pictured rocks are streaked in red, orange, blue-green, and black. Not painted, but stained by minerals bleeding out of the stone. Iron leaves rust red, copper leaves blue and green, manganese leaves black, carried down the cliff face by groundwater into a slow natural mural up to 200 feet tall. It became the first national lakeshore in the country in 1966. People expect a Great Lakes shoreline of gray rock and gravel. Here it looks as though someone poured watercolor down the cliffs. 24. It holds every other lake, plus 3. People assume the Great Lakes are roughly in a league together. They aren't close. Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario added together come to about 2,500 cubic miles of water. Yet Superior alone holds 2,900. So you could pour all 4 neighbors into its basin and still have room for 3 more lakes the size of Erie on top. The figure repeated online is 4 extra Lake Eries, and it's wrong. The real math lands on 3, but 3 is staggering enough. It's why everything here runs on a different scale. The storms, the cold, the depth, because the sheer mass of water behind them is. 23. The November gales that hunt ships. You'd expect a lake's deadliest season to be the dead of winter, when it's frozen and storm-lashed. On Superior, it's the autumn. What makes these storms so violent is how fast the air collapses into winter. A cold front can crash the temperature 40 to 60 degrees in a single day, and that sudden instability whips the lake into a fury. Winds gust over 70 miles an hour and pile the water into walls. Sailors have a name for them, the Gales of November, the phrase Gordon Lightfoot used in his song about the most famous wreck Superior ever took. A ship will come to before the end. Summer lulls people into trust. Autumn is when the lake collects. 22. The loneliest national park in America. Isle Royal sits far out in the northern water, and almost nobody goes there. In 2023, the entire park drew just 28,965 visitors. The 5th least visited national park in the country. No roads, no bridge. You reach it by a ferry of up to 5.5 hours, or by seaplane, or not at all. From mid-October to mid-April, it closes completely, sealed off by ice. But here's the twist. The few who make the trip stay longer than visitors to almost any other park. Hardest to reach, least visited, and fiercely loved by the few who get there. 21. The lake that breathes. Lake Superior breathes, not poetically, but measurably. Wind and pressure shove the water toward one end of the lake, and when they let go, it sloshes slowly back, rocking between Duluth and Sault Ste. Marie on a rhythm of about 8 hours. Scientists call it a seiche. Usually it's a gentle rise and fall of inches, but it can spike. In June 2025, a sudden surge near Thunder Bay drove the water on Whitefish Bay up 45 inches in under 3 hours, the largest jump ever measured there. People think a lake just sits at one level. Superior doesn't sit still. It rocks endlessly, a tide that isn't a tide. 20. The 1913 storm that erased a fleet. People picture a shipwreck as a single vessel meeting bad luck. In November 1913, Superior helped destroy an entire fleet at once. For 4 days, the worst storm in Great Lakes history tore across the water. They called it the White Hurricane, with winds at hurricane force, snow so thick captains couldn't see their own decks, and waves over 35 feet. The freighter Henry B. Smith steamed out of Marquette into the teeth of it and was gone with all 25 aboard. Across all the lakes, more than 250 people died in a matter of days. It remains the deadliest natural disaster ever to strike the region, and it formed and died in less than a week. 19. The volcanoes made of ice. In the dead of winter, parts of Superior's shoreline start to erupt. As a shelf of ice builds out from shore, waves keep rolling in beneath it, and that trapped water is forced up through cracks, bursting out as slush and spray that freezes the instant it lands. Layer by layer, it builds into cones, sometimes several feet tall, that look unmistakably like miniature volcanoes. They rumble, spit water, and grow with every wave. Scientists at Michigan Tech track them each winter. People picture winter as the season a lake goes still and silent. On Superior, that's when the shoreline starts erupting. 18. A shoreline that reaches the Bahamas. Superior's shoreline is far longer than its size on a map suggests. Counting every bay, inlet, and island, it runs about 2,700 miles. Straighten that out into a single line, and it would stretch from the lake's western tip at Duluth all the way down to the Bahamas. One lake, with an edge long enough to reach the tropics. That length is why it took so long to chart, why so many wrecks were never found, and why whole stretches of the northern shore are still roadless wilderness. Superior's edge is longer than the entire eastern seaboard of the United States, and most of it sees almost no one. 17. The hidden peak that may have sunk a ship. Out near Caribou Island, the lake floor hides a danger that never breaks the surface. A shallow rise called 6 Fathom Shoal, where the bottom climbs to within 20 or 30 feet of the surface in otherwise deep water. For a loaded freighter riding low in a storm, that's a knife under the waterline. When the most famous ship Superior ever took went down in 1975, a Canadian investigation gave weight to the theory that she scraped this very shoal, tearing her hull open without the crew ever knowing. No one can prove it, but the shoal is real, and it sits right where investigators believe she passed. We'll come back to that ship. 16. The 6,000-pound rock that started a rush. On September 9, 1875, a mine agent on Isle Royale named Alonzo Davis logged something extraordinary. His crews had pulled a single mass of native copper from the ground, weighing 6,000 pounds, 3 tons of nearly pure metal in one piece. It set off a frenzy. The real draw was the metal itself. Superior holds the largest deposit of pure native copper on Earth. Copper you don't have to smelt from ore because it's already metal. The same copper the Ojibwe had worked for thousands of years. People think the great rushes were about gold out west. One of the biggest was about copper, up here on a lake. 15. The clearest water in the Great Lakes. Of all 5 Great Lakes, Superior is the one you can see deepest into. And it isn't close. On an average day, you can see down about 27 feet. In the right spots, divers report nearer 100. The reason is that the water is so cold and so starved of nutrients that almost nothing grows in it. So with little life suspended to scatter light, it just keeps going down. It's part of why the shipwrecks here are so eerily preserved. You can float above a century-old hull and see its deck laid out beneath you like it's behind glass. People assume a lake this huge must be dark and murky. Superior is a cold, clear window, all the way down. 14. The wolves down to a single pair. On Isle Royale, scientists have watched wolves hunt moose since 1958, the longest-running predator-prey study on Earth. For years, it held a balance. Then it unraveled. and the trigger was almost absurd. Around 1981, a visitor's pet dog carried canine parvovirus onto the island. The wolves crashed, and the survivors, cut off by the lake, grew so inbred they couldn't recover. By 2016, the entire population was down to 2 closely related animals. Rather than watch them vanish, the Park Service began ferrying new wolves across the ice to rebuild it. This park isn't scenery, it's a live laboratory, where a single pet dog helped doom a species. 13. The sun sets later on the western shore. Superior is so wide east to west that the day doesn't end at the same time across it. The lake spans about 8 degrees of longitude, from Duluth to Sault Ste. Marie, wide enough that it actually straddles 2 time zones, Central and Eastern. By the clock of the sky, sunset comes roughly half an hour later on the western shore than the eastern. Stand in Duluth and you're still in daylight, while the far end of the same lake has slipped into dusk. People think of a lake as something you take in at a glance. Superior is wide enough to keep 2 different clocks. 12. The 3 sisters that hunt in a row. Sailors on Superior tell of a killer that arrives not as one wave, but as 3, the 3 sisters. The first floods a ship's deck. The second crashes down before that water has drained, piling weight on weight. The third, often the largest, hits while the vessel is already buried and struggling to rise. And it isn't just folklore. Researchers have studied how Superior's geometry lets separate lines of waves converge and stack into sudden towering walls. And it's the phenomenon blamed in the lake's most famous sinking. People picture waves as a steady rhythm you ride over. Superior's worst don't come in a rhythm. They come in 3s, and the last one is the one that finishes you. 11. The caves you can only reach on frozen water. On the Wisconsin shore, the Apostle Islands hide a chain of sea caves carved into red sandstone. And in a hard winter, the lake freezes solid enough to walk on. You can cross the ice on foot to reach caves hung with curtains of icicles and frozen waterfalls, lit blue from within. But it depends on the ice holding, and in a warming climate, that's happening less and less. The caves opened about 2 months in 2014, drawing 138,000 people, then just 9 days in 2015. Some years, they don't open at all. The only way in is to wait for the lake itself to freeze hard enough to carry you. We're into the final 10 now, and this is where the lake stops being strange and starts being haunting. 10. It takes 551 billion gallons to raise it an inch. Superior is so vast, the numbers stop feeling real. To raise the level of the entire lake by a single inch, you'd need to add 551 billion gallons of water. 1 inch, and the water already in there barely moves. A drop that enters stays on average 191 years before it works its way out. The water you'd swim in today fell as rain around the end of the Civil War. People flick water levels around in their heads like a bathtub. This is a lake where nudging the surface 1 inch takes more water than most countries hold. 9. The metal's so pure, it needed no smelting. Almost everywhere else on Earth, copper is locked inside ore and has to be heated and broken apart to free the metal. Around Lake Superior, it comes out of the ground already pure, solid, workable metal you can cut and hammer into shape. It formed more than 1 billion years ago, when this region was being ripped open by what geologists call the Mid-Continent Rift, a tear that nearly split North America in half before it failed. Molten rock flooded the cracks and left pure copper threaded through the stone. People assume early metalworking needed furnaces. On this lake, the Earth did the smelting 1 billion years in advance. 8. The coast they call fresh. People on the Great Lakes have a name for where they live that most of the country has never heard: the Fresh Coast. Not the East Coast, not the West. A coastline defined not by salt, but by the largest surface freshwater system on the planet, touching 8 US states and the province of Ontario. It's half a joke and half a quiet point of pride. A way of insisting the people up here have a coast too, just one you can drink. And Superior is the crown of it. The coldest, clearest, deepest water in the whole system. Along the top of the country runs a coast made of fresh water. 7. The captain's last words. On the evening of November 10th, 1975, as the worst storm of the season tore across the lake, Captain Ernest McSorley of the Edmund Fitzgerald radioed the freighter trailing about 10 miles behind him, the Arthur M. Anderson. His vessel was listing badly now, taking damage in the dark, so the other crew asked how they were holding up. The answer came back steady, almost calm. "We are holding our own." About 10 minutes later, the Fitzgerald simply vanished from the radar screen. No mayday, no warning. 29 men were aboard, and not one was ever found. The largest ship on the lake went down between two radio calls, her captain insisting to the end that they were fine. 6. 10,000 years in the making. The lake you see is young, but the rock beneath it is almost unimaginably old. The basin was carved only about 10,000 years ago, gouged out by glaciers a mile thick as the last ice age let go and meltwater filled the hollow they left. But the bedrock cradling that water goes back more than 1 billion years, to the same great rift that made the copper. So Superior is 2 time scales at once. A young lake resting in an ancient scar. People assume a lake like this has always been here. It hasn't. It's a fresh wound laid over a 1 billion-year-old crack in the continent. 5. The locks that built industrial America. At the eastern end of the lake, where Superior drains toward Lake Huron, the water drops 21 feet over rapids no ship could climb. So in 1855, they built the Sioux Locks to lift vessels up and over. And that quiet stretch of engineering became one of the most critical choke points in the country. Most of the iron ore that built America's rails, cars, and skyscrapers passed through here, and nearly all of it depends on a single chamber, the Poe Lock. One study estimated that if it failed unexpectedly, it could cost 11 million jobs and over $1 trillion. The ore that built the great cities rode out of Superior through locks most Americans have never heard of. 4. 40-foot walls of water. How big do Superior's waves actually get? The largest ever measured reached 28.8 feet, recorded by a buoy off Granite Island on October 24, 2017. The biggest wave ever instrument measured on any lake anywhere. And that's just what a machine survived to record. Modeling of the 1975 storm that took the Fitzgerald suggests waves that night may have reached 46 feet. Water as tall as a 4-story building, marching across the lake in the dark. A wave like that doesn't slap a ship, it buries it. People think the ocean owns the monster waves. One of the most dangerous wave environments on Earth is a lake in the Midwest. 3. The sea you cannot see across, and why that's the danger. Early on, we said you can't see across this lake. Here's why that matters, and it isn't about the view. The same 160 miles of open water that hides the far shore is also a runway, an uninterrupted distance for the wind to grab the surface and build it, mile after mile, into something enormous. That open reach is exactly what lets a storm raise 40-foot waves out of flat water. So the awe and the danger are the same fact, seen twice. The thing that makes you gasp at how it looks like an ocean is the very thing that lets it kill like one. The beauty of Superior and the danger of Superior aren't 2 stories, they're one. Its vastness is the threat. 2. The water that kills in a heat wave. This is the one that catches people off guard every single summer. It can be 90 degrees on the beach, kids playing, people wading in, while the water just offshore is still near 40. When a body hits cold like that, it doesn't ease in. The chest seizes, the breath is ripped away in an involuntary gasp, and if your head is under at that moment, you breathe in water before you can stop. They call it cold water shock, and it can incapacitate a swimmer in under a minute, long before hypothermia is even a factor. Roughly 2 out of 3 people who die this way were strong swimmers, and more than half die within 10 feet of safety. The lake doesn't need a storm to take someone. It just needs a warm day and someone who trusts the air instead of the water. 1. The lake that keeps its dead. On November 10, 1975, the Edmund Fitzgerald, 729 feet of steel, the largest ship on the Great Lakes, went down in a Superior gale with all 29 men aboard. She lies today in 2 pieces, in about 530 feet of water, just 17 miles from the safety of Whitefish Point. When they found her, the lifeboats told the story, smashed and twisted but still attached, never launched. There had been no time. And this is where the lake earns its oldest, darkest name. In most water, the dead eventually rise, lifted to the surface by the gases of decay. But Superior is so cold, all the way down, that those gases barely form, and what goes down tends to stay down. In 1995, divers raised the Fitzgerald's bronze bell and rang it 29 times, once for each man, then set a replica in its place, engraved with all their names. The crew themselves were never brought up. Sailors have a saying for this lake, older than the Fitzgerald and proven by her: Superior never gives up her dead. We started at the curve of the Earth and the cold that kills in July. This is where it leads. The most beautiful lake on the continent is also the one that keeps what it takes. Those are 35 secrets of Lake Superior, a lake that turned out to be a sea, a wonder that turned out to be a warning. If you made it this far, you're exactly the kind of person this channel is for. So subscribe and come explore the rest of the country with us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.